Hello and welcome to the Food for Data interview series at Orbition. We are currently conducting an interview series with current thought leaders in the data and analytics space. This will offer our audience a valuable insight into how these speakers conduct their data and analytics practice, whilst discussing their challenges and giving advice for others. The interviews you'll be hearing from are in the food and agri-tech industry. So these could be from startups to well-established brands as they share their experiences, knowledges and learning. So today we are sitting down with Emily, who is the head of data from IGS Limited. So welcome, Emily.
Hi, nice to see you.
I see too. So we'll be discussing vertical farming and how it is a very data-centric industry. Emily will also discuss what the challenges are working within this industry and what the future looks like for vertical farming. So let's firstly set the scene for our audience today and give them a bit of an insight about yourself and what you are doing at IGS.
Yeah, sure. So hi, I'm Emily. So I am the head of data at Intelligent Growth Solutions, or IGS. And we are a vertical farming technology provider. And I normally have to explain a little bit what that means. So vertical farming it's not a new concept, but it's got a lot of traction in sort of the last 5-ish years. And the idea is that we are facing increasing difficulties in growing food in the conventional way. You've got climate change, you've got things like drought and changing land use, meaning that agriculture is increasingly being squeezed and everyone's trying to get more yield in a smaller area with fewer inputs, and it's very difficult to do. And one possible tool in the toolkit for doing that is vertical farming. So vertical farming is the idea of bringing a lot of the agricultural production indoors into a vertical farm. So I don't think this is the technical term, but I call like traditional farming like horizontal farming. So you've got your horizontal field, and then if you imagine cutting that up into squares about the size of like a dining room table, and then you stack them on top of each other in racking. You provide light, temperature control, irrigation, and you grow the crop indoors in what we call a total controlled environment. So it's also known as TCEA, Total Controlled Environment Agriculture. So that's the idea of vertical farming. It has a lot of benefits. So like I was saying, it can dramatically reduce land use. It can protect the crop from things like climate change or unexpected flooding or drought or all of the extreme weather events that we're having. But it does also require resources that your normal horizontal agriculture doesn't. So for example, you do need to provide the lighting. You do need to be able to track and monitor the crop in there to try and get the best yields out. And I set that scene because it's important to understand that in a way, outdoor normal horizontal agriculture is also becoming more data-driven, but in a controlled environment like R1, you really need to have that data and that insight to allow you to check you're doing the right thing and make informed decisions so you can grow the best crop. So that's what I do. I lead the team at IGS that's looking at our data and being able to use it to improve both how our machine operates and also how customers can grow their crop.
Amazing. Thank you for that insight there. So what would you say makes vertical farming a new and data-centric area in the agri-tech industry?
Sure. So I think agri-tech and using data to improve farming has been getting more and more traction over the last few years. So it's not a new industry in that sense, but I think the difference is the scale that you're operating at. So in a normal outdoor field, farmers are increasingly using drones or climate predictions or aerial footage to improve their yields and track their crops and know when is the best time to harvest and all of that, which is super exciting. It's really good. But then if you take that indoors, you have so much more potential for gathering data because you've got this controlled environment. Instead of just knowing roughly what your temperature is in your field, which might vary if you've got one patch that's under a shady tree or another patch that's slightly lower, you can get temperature gradients in your field. if you take that to the indoors, you can measure that, and so you can be more precise. The amount of data you can collect is phenomenal if you're willing to put in all of the sensors. And from my point of view, I think there's also a bit more responsibility to use that data. So outdoors, I mean, farmers have to deal with all sorts, the weather, the pests, all of this, but there's only so much that's in their control. For example, when they spray fertilizer, or when they choose to harvest the crop, or when they choose to sow the crop. Whereas in a vertical farm, in a controlled environment agriculture setting, all of the decisions are up to the grower. So you can decide how long you have your sunshine on for, or when you water, how much you water, what you water. So you have all of these extra decisions that you have to make as a grower, which is great. It allows you to really tailor the environment for the crop, but it also, all of that extra responsibility, you want to make sure you're making the right decisions. So data is the way to do that.
Okay, amazing. And what challenges would you say that the agri-tech industry face in collecting and using crop data effectively?
So yeah, very good question. I think the challenge is the scale of the data collection, and then also making sure you're collecting the right thing. So it's all too easy to just be like, I can sensorize the whole thing. I'm going to add 100 sensors and 100 widgets, and I'm going to get all of this data. But if you're not thinking about what you want to do with the data and the value you're trying to derive from it, you can end up collecting so much meaningless data that is just clogging up your storage, and it's not useful for you. It's not going to be useful for anyone in the long term. So one of the challenges is making sure you're collecting the right data in a consistent way. And I think that's something the industry is beginning to get a hold of, but every farmer will have slightly different measurements for their crop. And I think standardization of those measurements so that we can compare between different crop types and different farming setups is really important. We're getting there, but yeah, if you don't collect the right data, you can't do the analysis. And I think the industry is a little bit guilty sometimes of saying they're collecting all this data, but then if you dig into it, the actual usability of it is not always as much as you would hope.
Okay, and you've mentioned that you've got a great data team at IGS from our conversations, which is great. So for other organisations or yourselves, I know we've spoken about the lack of limited sector knowledge and experts in this field. How do you think that impacts the recruitment process?
Yeah, so I'm lucky. I have a really fantastic team that we've been growing over the last nearly 2 years now. And it's a really unusual team because, like you say, there's none of that industry that's already well established that you can pull from, because vertical farming, like I said, it's been around for a few years now. It's getting a lot more traction, but there's not sort of a 50-year industry with experts who have been doing vertical farming for 20 years. There just really isn't. And if those individuals do exist, they're very hard to find, and they're often on more of like the mechanical side of it, not so much the data side of it. So you're completely right. We do have a bit of a situation where we've got a very cool new emerging technology and sector that does require very data-centric people to be able to unlock a lot of that potential. But you've got the limitation of not having a ready talent pool to pull from. So I don't know if I've gone about it the right way, but what we've done is we've been pulling from a real broad range of sectors and bringing the knowledge from all of those sectors together. And so far it's working. So we've got neuroscientists, we've got astrophysicists, we've got economists, we've got people with backgrounds in teaching, in botany, all sorts, like a real, like chemical engineering, a real range. And it's great because they approach the problem in a different way, and it's really refreshing to see them apply their ability to do computer vision to track black hole progress on our industry. So they're using that knowledge to then track crop growth over time and things like that. So it's probably more difficult. You have to be a little bit more open-minded about who you recruit, but from my perspective, it's working well and it's really exciting, and I really enjoy it.
Good, that's good. Sounds like it's successful over there with your team. Really good. And from the uncertainties and the inexperience for this new exciting industry, what solutions are being explored to kind of address what we've just been speaking about, do you think?
So one of the ethoses at IGS is that we don't want to reinvent the wheel. There's very little benefit in trying to do something that another industry has already done really well. So this sort of idea really is throughout the company. So a lot of our engineering is borrowing from complementary industries. So HVAC, so all of the environmental control, we don't need to reinvent that. Other people, other companies have come up with ways of controlling the environment, and we just need to take what they've done, learn from it, and then adapt it to our system. So very much I try and apply that to the data side as well. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We just have to learn from other industries and take that knowledge and apply it. So you do need to be a bit creative to adapt it, but very much we're not wasting our energy on reinventing stuff that other industries have already done quite well. Having said that, not everything adapts perfectly. So I think I was talking earlier about how a lot of outdoor farmers are now using drone footage and aerial footage to analyze their crops, and you have different metrics for doing that. That's a really good starting point because it gives us an indication that that is one way to monitor the crop. But then you've just got completely different scales. So that drone footage might easily have sort of a kilometer of crop underneath it, whereas because of the way that you're stacking the crops up in a vertical farm, your window to be able to see the crop, your like little opening, is much narrower. So your field of view is completely different, and you just need to be mindful of how easy it is to adapt some of the outdoor technology to this indoor setting.
Makes sense. And with the integration of those kind of new sensing technologies, how does this improve data capture and enhance decision making in vertical farming?
Yeah, so it's exciting and daunting, the number of new sensors coming out. So some of them have been developed for outdoor agriculture, some are purely for indoor, and you've got to use your judgment and not get too swept up with the hype. So like I was saying, there's some simple approaches you can take, for example, for monitoring crops, just using computer vision and normal RGB, red, green, blue cameras, or you can go at the other end of the spectrum, and there are emerging very high-tech, very cool sensors which vary in price, which can also do crop monitoring, so checking the health of the crop and giving you information that is not available via those more simplistic means. So it's both exciting and you need to be a little bit careful of the hype, because ultimately for this industry to be successful, it needs to be commercially viable. So potentially in a research setting, it would make sense to invest in that high-tech sensor that gives you real insight for you to be able to develop your recipes and really tailor the environment to the crop. But once you know that, maybe you don't need that sensor in a commercial setting where having that extra cost, where you're trying to sell relatively low margin crops often, for example, lettuce, it would take too long to pay back the cost of it. So I think what I'm saying is you have to use your judgment. There are cool, exciting sensors coming, but you also need to think about the commercials of it and how you can apply that.
Amazing. Well, thank you for joining us today, Emily. It's been really great to have you on the Food for Data interview series. And I think you're our first participant from the agri-tech sector, which is great. So I hope a lot of our audience takes a lot away from this today. So yeah, thank you for joining us.
No, thank you for having me.